I've been chronically late and not prepared for my whole life. But part of what is going on, and it's really fascinating, is that I actually think this, right, in my head, that I am late and unprepared for my whole life. But if you look at what I've been able to accomplish, it's actually the complete opposite. Right. So this story that we have in our head is often put there from other people that you're somehow behind, you're not good enough, you're a problem. All of those things, all those basic stories, um, I believe are because somebody put that in your head. And it could have been somebody that was close to you. It could have been people that you worked with, any number of different things. And you simply have to think in your head, like, why do you go through all of those moments where you feel like that? Why do I feel like I'm chronically late? Does it actually matter? Right? Like, and in general, the response for most of this is no, it does not matter that much. And um, you will get through life and you will be successful and it will be totally fine, even if you're chronically late. And you know, or chronically behind or any of those particular things. And that's where I wanted to sort of think about, or where us to actually begin is, um, yeah, okay, so that's in our mind, right? But if you sort of deconstruct this, right, what does it mean if you're late? Well, you just show up a few minutes later than what somebody else had suggested, and it could potentially, on the other side, affect what's going on with them. Um, and so it's actually the response of how they deal with the situation that's actually the more important, right? Like a well-adjusted human being, barring that there is, you know, barring that you're within reason, right? I'm not talking about if you don't show up to meetings, which, man, does that ever give me nightmares. Um, and it's happened once or twice in my life because of various different reasons that were kind of outside of my control. Um, but in general, if you show up within 10-15 minutes, um, it's often how other people deal with it that's actually the sort of more, it's the indicator of what's going on. So if you show up late or you do something that's quote unquote inappropriate in society, break a norm, um, and they don't react very well to it, and they get really strongly upset, you have to ask, it's not you. It's a question of what's going on with them. How are they thinking about things and what's actually going on in their head? And I want you to repeatedly think about that. And it's taken me years and years and years of thinking about this stuff. Um, and like a lot of work. And it always comes down to, wait a minute. Yes, that is something that it should be a mild annoyance if you're late. But if you show up within 5-10 minutes of a particular time, then should be completely acceptable. Nobody is going to be out that much, right? Unless it's somebody that is extraordinary busy, but I can't think of that many people that are like that. Maybe the Pope. And even still, um, I'm not sure about that. So if they react in a very negative way and it doesn't, it just doesn't work that well, it gives me a tremendous amount of, say, social anxiety from that. So if they don't act very well, it's on them. But then it's how you are dealing with that is more about the important thing of how you actually control the situation, what's actually going on. right? So I have a tendency to, if somebody gets angry at me, I hate confrontation. It scares the bejeebus out of me. And I think I have a long history of that where I'm terrified of confrontation, right? I don't want to upset people. Um, I'm your stereotypical people pleaser kind of person, right? Like I don't want other people to be upset and hurt. Um, and why is that? Well, I probably have some deep rooted things that happened when I was a kid. I remember, a couple of sort of traumatic things that happened when I was a kid, but we all have traumatic things that happen with a kid as kids, right? We remember those things. But and some of it is just, that's your biology in terms of how you're programmed, right? I see definitely in my kids, right? Like you see that there is differences in biology for sure. But what you need to realize is to, besides all of that stuff, is how are you going to deal with that anxiety, or how are you going to deal with when somebody reacts poorly around you? I think the biggest thing is to use that as a signal of, do you want to be around those particular people, right? That is a strong thing to think about, just to distance yourself. If somebody reacts poorly to something and just doesn't like brush it off as like, oh, it's kind of goofy. Um, and if they react poorly to it, then not only in the long run, you sort of have to figure out how to distance yourself, right? To get that sort of stress out of your life, but then come back to, how do I internalize this so I realize that I'm a good person no matter what happened, right? And that's the hard part, that I tend to internalize things for a long time. And I tend to think of myself as, all of the stereotypical things that we do of us that are like this, or these sort of fragile, quote unquote, egos. And I think of myself as, I go the opposite of of what many people do, where they think that they're awesome. I think I'm a loser. I can't do anything, all that kind of stuff. Um, and which I think is very normal to go through those kind of things. But this is where you have to internalize and say, wait a minute, I was just doing what I could possibly do at the time, and that is totally fine. It's how they dealt with things that was more of the problem. And then on top of it is like, okay, given that, right, I could forgive them. I can forgive everybody that has those experiences because, man, something's just not right, because that's not how normal people deal with things. They don't go around, you know, um, blowing a gasket or getting angry or any of those kind of things. They're dealing with crap. And man, you should really, really feel sorry for them because they're dealing with crap. But at the same time, you got to learn how to, and I think this is the biggest thing for me, is to learn how to laugh it off, how to just say, "Man, that is ridiculous. What the hell happened there?" Learn how to detach. Like, these are really important skills. People think that they're like bad things, but they're important skills. Right? Learning how to detach from the scenario, learning that some people are just, you can't fix it, right? And so what you will have to do is do a whole bunch of work over the course of you growing up and going through different things. Is remember, we're all pretty damn good people inside, right? Mind you, some of us have biological differences. I'm going to say that some of us have different sort of ways of growing up, but then you're going to come back to, how do I, as a person, live with me going forward? I know that I am generally a good person with good values, which I think most people are. And like, I haven't done anything too heinous. Um, but I have to live with this person for the long run. And that's where I got to go through a lot of reflecting of, I'm actually a damn good person inside, right? And that is a different position than I would have said 5, 10 years ago. And it's an evolving thing where I'm letting go of a lot of that sort of shame and anxiety of being late, or any number of different sort of minor infractions that you might experience, nice, very minor stuff, um, and realize the problem was not you. None of that stuff, right? Like growing up in that particular way was not you, right? Like you could not change any of those particular moments. And you were just put into that. And that's where you work into one of the exercises that a lot of sort of therapists do is to reimagine yourself as that person and talk to that person and walk through that person and say, hey, you know what? This was not your fault. There was no reason for that to actually happen. That was a pretty crappy scenario. And you walk forward from that. And I want you to think about that and see how you can practice it in your own life. There's many moments that you're going to go through and you're going to internalize things, but don't internalize it. That's somebody else is behaving very poorly. Unless you're the aggressor, but you're not going to feel like this if you're the aggressor. So I just want you to think about that going forward. How are you dealing with the moments in life that you're going to bump up against other people that are just really minor infractions? They're really not that important. And the important thing is to come back to center yourself and do well inside. So I wanted to say, all right, take care and have a wonderful day.